This question came over from Twitter, and I thought it would be easier to do a whole video on it rather than try to summarize it all within a tweet. And yes, we're in a tech news drought, so if you have ideas or suggestions or things you want me to talk more about, feel free to suggest things, because just saying, Drew must be out of ideas as I come up with an idea and post it, yeah, that's not helping. But I do actually think this is an interesting concept, and the obvious short answer is if there was an alternative ecosystem that I deemed better. Let's begin. Keep in mind this is highly subjective, so I know many of you probably think there are lots of ecosystem setups you could do outside of Apple's walled garden that work better for you, because they have features or hardware that you can't get within Apple's ecosystem, so that means that's the better ecosystem for you. So I get to be a tad more opinionated and subjective. I know, I didn't think it was possible for me to be more opinionated, but the reason I love the concept of Apple's walled garden is kind of in that terminology itself, the fact that it's a garden, it's beautiful, it's lovely, and I love walking around it and seeing what flowers and what plants are inside of it. And also, walled garden insinuates that things outside of the garden may not be so good. That's kind of the viewpoint I've had on non-Apple hardware for a while, is like, yeah, there might be a couple of trees, there might be some grass here and there, but overall, outside of the walled garden is a desolate wasteland of dust and third-party clunky software. So I will stay in the garden as long as there's nothing outside of it that's much more enjoyable. So what exactly would need to happen for another company to convince me I should switch to them or I should leave the Apple ecosystem? The other thing I'll keep in mind for people is that transitioning ecosystems is a fairly complicated process, especially when we're not talking just about one phone or just one computer. No, we're talking about my watch, my headphones, my tablet, phone, computer, maybe even down to the headphones and like your smart speakers. This ecosystem thing can be huge, so transitioning is not something you want to do just because you've heard there might be some quirky, neat little features that your iPhone didn't have. This is a process, and it's an expensive one. So in order to get me out of Apple's ecosystem, you would have to demonstrate an alternative one that is objectively better in many ways, not just quite as good, or not just like, it's about the same as Apple's ecosystem, and you might get in this ecosystem a slightly better phone that has a camera hole instead of a notch. That's not enough for me. This would have to have some clear and obvious advantages that I could see myself taking advantage of. And right now, what works so well across the ecosystem is the lack of having to set up things. I know very well that you can download certain apps for your PC that work well with your Android, and there's third-party applications that can mimic AirDrop, or maybe even there's some I don't know about that allow my watch to unlock my computer, or let me pay for things through a third-party payment service that allows me to confirm through the watch. But that's going to require more setup, more processes, and of course we have a lot of first-party hardware from Microsoft with their Surface devices, and we have a lot of first-party hardware and software from Google, and I'm somewhat interested to see how the Pixel 6 launch goes, because Google's designing the OS and the hardware. But of course, a lot of people don't buy into the Pixel, and most people are buying into Samsung and OnePlus, and what that all results in is a more cluttered overall ecosystem to me, because you're dealing with Samsung or OnePlus passwords alongside your Google passwords, and you have to have other accounts and apps that you have to set up through these, and that means that your Microsoft and Windows account and email and password is going to be separate from your phone's email and password, and you're going to have another third-party service that brings texts from your phone to your computer so that I can still send text messages via my desktop or laptop. I know there's ways of doing it, it's just more steps overall, and again, just more complicated to manage all of these different accounts. That's one of the lovely things about Apple's ecosystem, is just the sheer simplicity of having one password and one email for so much of the stuff you do. My pro applications are through Apple, iMessage is all through Apple, and I can get those texts on my watch, my phone, my iPad, and there's a lot of cross-compatibility with applications that I download through the App Store. I can sign in with Apple, I can use Apple Pay across all these devices. So I don't know who exactly wants to do it, I don't care who, if it's Samsung or it's Microsoft or it's Google, but one of these most major companies would have to kind of emulate every step of this experience, which I agree is not very likely and frankly maybe not possible, especially as Apple is ingraining me more in their ecosystem with this whole Apple Silicon transition, because now with the M1 chip, and likely in a few months we're going to see M1X chip, we're seeing unparalleled performance for the money, where you're going to be getting extremely efficient processing power, and that extremely helps me because of all of the video editing I do on a regular basis. We have pro software that's designed by Apple running on hardware that's designed by Apple, and of course the OS is designed by Apple, so through and through you get this really efficient workflow where export times are incredibly low and the fans don't kick up very high because Apple's in complete control of this experience, which has its downsides. You know, you're not able to sideload apps on your phone as easily, and you're probably not able to open up your machines and customize them and replace certain parts as easily because Apple has everything locked down. But one of the biggest reasons I've been an Apple sheep for so long is because I've never really had the desire to take apart and tinker and build things from the ground up myself. I just like tech products to work. I just want to buy them and take them out of the box and they instantly start working. And the least amount of steps there are, the least amount of processes there are, the better. So the fact that I can have a watch and a Mac and all of a sudden just click one button on a push notification from my Mac, and now anytime I go up to it, it unlocks as long as my Apple Watch is on. That's the type of first party ecosystem support that I love. And being able to airdrop things so easily, you know, I have this iPad with great photo editing tools and the Apple Pencil. I can make my video thumbnails exactly how I like them, and then with just a couple taps, I'm able to share it directly to my Mac, and I don't have to upload it to some cloud service and then download it from that cloud service. It just shares device to device, and also with features like Sidecar, I can instantly turn my iPad into an external monitor when I need to. So I'm trying to imagine who of all these non-Apple companies probably has the best shot at mimicking this whole ecosystem experience. Frankly, I think if Google's custom silicon goes well, they might have the best opportunity, because clearly they've been making Chromebooks for a while, but they have never really been super capable compared to Macs. So maybe if the Tensor chip, like Apple Silicon, is able to have great power efficiency and great performance, they could start bringing it to other products within the Pixel ecosystem. And if they started making powerful laptops and desktops that had performance that could rival Apple's Macs, and then Google actually got more into the software business of making pro applications like audio editing apps or software writing apps or video editing applications that could mimic that of the performance of Final Cut, and maybe they updated their tablet game so that the Play Store could optimize for tablet screens better, we get better performance, and we don't have any more Pixel Slate embarrassments. And of course, there's been rumors for a long time that Pixel's working on a watch, so if they were able to mimic and create a far superior operating system on the watch with great health features and easy to access notification management, as well as efficient processors so that there's not much lag and the watches can age fairly well, I just see a more direct path than anybody else, because Samsung makes great hardware, but they seem to never want to design that many operating systems from the ground up. You know, they toy around with Tizen, but they never get too serious about it, and they of course don't want to lose their access to the Play Store, so they get all their hardware right, but it clutters the ecosystem when you have to go through Microsoft's OS or Google's OS to use Samsung hardware. I don't see OnePlus breaking that far into the laptop game or very far into the tablet game, so I don't see them really having much of a shot. And Microsoft, I'll admit, I love a lot of their Surface hardware. Like, for the longest time, I always wanted to get a Surface Studio, not because the specs are any good, but just because I love the idea of a giant display that you can use as an all-in-one desktop and then swivel down, and that would tempt me. But the smartphone side of Microsoft has always been very weak, and I don't see them really getting back into the wearables game anytime soon. And the Surface Duo, to me, felt like they weren't even really trying, because now they're using Android anyway. So I'm not trying to say you can't have good ecosystems outside of Apple. I'm just trying to say, for me, in my personal use cases and how comfortable I am using all of my different accessories, and as much as I complain about iPads not getting pro applications, or as much as I complain about Lightning still being around, overall, I cannot find an ecosystem outside of Apple's that would mimic the simplicity of it and integrate so well that I would consider switching. But let's just say, for the sake of the question, if Apple disappeared from the face of the earth and all of my Apple products went away, what would I probably buy into? I would likely, across the entire ecosystem, try to buy the most first-party hardware and software, because I know that's probably going to be a more streamlined experience. experience with less passwords and more custom exclusive experience I wouldn't be able to get on others. So for a phone, I would likely end up getting something like a Pixel 6 Pro, assuming the Tensor chip is really good and the video performance gets massively upgraded. I'm very interested to see the direction Google takes the Pixel 6, so my answer might change depending on the price point or how good the Tensor chip is. But yeah, likely alongside that, I would want to get a Pixel Watch, and when it comes to my laptop or computer, I would seriously heavily be interested if Microsoft upgraded the Surface Studio to have more modern day specifications and also let it run like Windows 11. That would be kind of nice. That, or go down like the custom PC route and just make the best computer I could for video editing and use my own high refresh rate external monitor. Not my ideal scenario, but if the Surface Studio didn't get updated, that's pretty much the only all-in-one PC I've ever had interest in. All the other all-in-one PCs out there have not captivated me as much as that one has. And I'd also probably get something like a Surface Book or a Surface Pro, something that I could turn into a tablet-like experience when I feel like it, but then still use it as a fully fledged laptop when I want. But honestly, my past experience with Windows has not been good. But if we're talking outside of Apple's ecosystem, that's pretty much the only direction I can go in. So at least Microsoft does design their own hardware and software on those platforms, so I know I'd be getting a very first-party streamlined experience. And then I guess I would just try to integrate my Google products with my Microsoft products as best as I possibly could. But honestly, the more I talk about this, the more I hate the idea of it. And I'm so glad Apple still exists. Although I think Samsung has some pretty unique built-in software that allows your phone and watch and laptop and all that to seamlessly communicate between each other, but I just don't think a lot of Samsung laptops go to the same performance power that I'm looking for in computers like my iMac Pro or whatever the M1X or crazy Apple Silicon they end up using in the Mac Pro. I don't know if Samsung's computers really go up in that high performance, but either way, outside of Apple's ecosystem, I'm going to be downloading a bunch of third-party applications to try to emulate what Apple does natively, and that's why I'm not interested in switching, but I'll admit it is possible. If Google got serious about doing more hardware and more pro software, they could technically build out an entire ecosystem that could rival Apple's, who knows, maybe even get better. They've got a ton of money, they've got a ton of resources, so they could do it, and I'm definitely using a lot of Google services now anyway, between YouTube and Google Photos and Gmail and Google Drive. Like, it could streamline my experience a lot further if I just had one password for like all of my work apps and for all of my hardware, but we'll see if Google wants to swing me over. I don't think it's gonna happen, but feel free to let me know what you guys would do if Apple was wiped off the face of the earth and all of your current Apple products. What would be your go-to ecosystem? And also, what would it take you to leave Apple's ecosystem if they were around, but other companies out there started doing the same things Apple does? More so than usual today, this is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you guys in the next one.